everybody. I'm Billie Stork, and I'm an alcoholic. I'm excited to be here. I'm excited to be back in Denver. I've been visiting Denver my whole life. My grandmother and my aunts and my relatives live here, and it's very exciting to be here again in Denver. And it's a great privilege to be part of your convention here. I always try to start my talks out with feelings, because for most of my life, what I did with feelings is I just pulled a shade right down on feelings. Didn't have anything to do with feelings, especially powerful feelings. Feelings that came from everywhere, feelings that came from nowhere, feelings I didn't know what they were, and I didn't know how to cope with them. And what I begin to realize now is life is feelings, and I am feelings. And that's why I talk about how I feel right now. When I came here to Alcoholics Anonymous, if you'd ask me how I felt, I'd tell you about my toe ache and my headache and my backache. And I absolutely had no idea about feelings. But you see, what I find out are feelings are energy. And when I block my energy, when I block my feelings, then I block my energy. And it goes into all those headaches and backaches and toe aches. And what I'm doing with my life now today is I'm trying to put adequate behavior with those kinds of feelings. For so much of my life, what they said about me is, she just doesn't act right. Well, how can you act right when you can't identify the feelings? A really good example of feelings, and I really have such a trouble talking about them now, was a couple of months ago. I live in Pasadena. And a couple of months ago, we had this big earthquake in Pasadena. And I live in this little house, this little 1926 house that Larry and I are redoing. And that earthquake came. On the day of that earthquake, I was up in the morning and I was getting ready to go to a sales meeting that I did not want to go to. I do medical sales, and I didn't want to go to this sales meeting because I felt that I was being asked to do something that my values were being compromised. So I did not want to go to this meeting. It was 6 o'clock in the morning, and I was putting my nylons on, and wham, that earthquake hit. And I got to tell you, that little house rocked and rolled and shook just like that. I am not kidding you. And I was terrified. And what I did, my chimney fell down. I have $12,000 worth of damage all around my house. And what I did is I looked around the house and I sat down and I was just shaking, kind of like I'm shaking right now on the inside, you know. And I stayed around for maybe about an hour and I drank a cup of coffee. And then what I did is I got myself all ready and I went down to that meeting. And I stayed at that meeting almost all day. And didn't think any more about it until the people came and they were starting to assess the value, and they were the insurance company and all these people started coming around, and I found out that I had $12,000 worth of damage of it. And I was riding with my boss last month, and a couple of weeks ago, and she was telling me something that happened at this meeting. And I went, I don't even remember what happened at that meeting that day. I really wasn't there that day. I mean, I was there, but I wasn't there. And then I went away from there and I thought, now why did I go to that meeting? And I remembered why I went to that meeting. When I was a little kid, what happened to me is my father was an alcoholic. My mother was very, very sick. And what happened to us at night, there would be these nightmare fights, brawls, all of this stuff going on. And you know what happened? I mean, up half the night with raging. My father was not only an alcoholic, he was a rageaholic. And all this stuff going on, and what did I do in the morning? I got up in the morning and I got dressed and I went to school, because that's what you do. So that's a lot of deals about feelings and how feelings are coming back to me today. I've really been talking about feelings for a couple of years now, and I have to really be careful what I talk about, because when I start talking about it, it starts happening in my life. Another deal is with jealousy. I got in a fight with Larry last New Year's, and he told me that I was jealous. Now, all my life, I believed I was not jealous. I might like to have a white Cadillac like yours, but I sure don't want yours because, see, I'm not a jealous person. Anyway, we got in this big fight, and it took me about 3 days to get to the feeling of jealousy. But what I find out is when I could, I got to tell you, it's the slimiest, rottenest, nastiest feeling in the world. But what really happens is when I get to feel the feeling, when I get to put a name on the feeling, when I get to identify the feeling, instead of just pulling a shade down on that feeling, then I get to have a choice on how I want to act on that feeling. Before, when I'm just out there reacting to everything that goes on, I don't have any choices. I had to drink. I mean, I heard last week a speaker was talking about alcoholism as a disease of feelings. And I totally believe that today. I didn't have any choices about how I could act. I just had to react. And now I find out that when I can feel the feeling, when I can put a name on the feeling, then I get to have a choice. So when I get to feel the feeling of jealousy, then, and name the feeling, then I got to say, well, what is it about that feeling? What is the fear? The fear is I'm going to be left behind. The fear is I'm not enough. And so what can I do? Has it ever worked for me to try to manipulate or anything else? No. So I don't have to act on that feeling. What I do is I drive around a lot of times, and I have to actually stop the car and say, how do you feel, Billie? So I can get those feelings from down here up to here, so I get some kind of a choice. When I came here to Alcoholics Anonymous, they told me to live in the now. It's very difficult to live in the now when I don't know what my feelings are for probably about 3 days or something, you know. I'm the daughter of an alcoholic and the wife of 3 alcoholics. I'm an alcoholic myself, and I have 4 drug-addicted or alcoholic children. A lot of alcoholism in my family. If you don't relate to that, I hope that you will listen for the recovery and listen for the feelings. I was the oldest of 4 girls. My father was a periodic alcoholic. My mother was very, very ill. I was like the top sergeant. I bossed everybody around. I saw to it that the kids had the right color socks on, they went to school on time, and that they had their lunch money and all of that kind of stuff. I just bossed everybody, and somehow I got it that it was my job, that I was supposed to save the world. And I thought that for a long time until I came to Alcoholics Anonymous. And I learned that the world didn't need to be saved, nor did they even want to be saved. And I used to see, my mother was very, very ill. And I can remember it was wartime. And one day I came home from school. There was never any consistency in our house. You never knew what was going to be happening when that door slammed behind me. And it was wartime. And I used to lie in bed, and I would get these perfect little dreams about what was going to be happening. And I decided that what I needed to have was I needed to have 32 pieces of double bubble gum, because you could not get it anyplace. And I was going to take it to school, and I was going to give all my friends a piece of double bubble gum, and then they were going to love me. And you know, that's the first time that I can ever remember, as I look back now, buying one of the biggest lies of my whole life. And that lie said, I'm no good. I'm not enough. I have to buy somebody something for them to like me. And that followed with me almost my whole life, till I came here to Alcoholics Anonymous. It's one of the biggest lies that I hear almost every alcoholic has bought for themselves, that lie that says, I'm no good. When I was 13 years old, I went to my first Alcoholics Anonymous meeting. My father took me to that meeting, and I got a description of an alcoholic. Now, my father was a periodic alcoholic. He was a binge drinker. And this is the description that I heard. An alcoholic is one, he just takes 1 little teaspoon of alcohol in his system, and he's got to get drunk. But that's not, that's what I heard at the time, but that's not what I know now since I've come to Alcoholics Anonymous. What I know now as an alcoholic, it doesn't make any difference how old you are, how much you drink, how long you've been drinking, where you drink, when you drink. None of that makes any difference at all, see? The bottom line is, if you have to continue drinking and alcohol is causing any problem in any area of your life. When I was 14 years old, sadly, my mother died. Her 2 sisters are here tonight, and my cousins, and that's very emotional for me, because I've come back home now, and they've always been there for me, and they're here tonight for me, and I'm really grateful for that, and thankful for that. And my mother died, and I became pregnant, and I got married, all in that order. And this guy that I married, he wasn't an alcoholic. He loved the women. I was his second wife, and he had 6 wives. And he did. So what did he do? He took off, and he took off when I was 8 months pregnant, and I was 20 years old with my 4th kid. And there he took off, see? And what I find out now, what happened as I told you about my childhood, the best way that I can describe my childhood, it was a childhood that was full of chaos, struggle, drama, fights, brawls, and all the nightmare that goes on with the disease of alcoholism. That's kind of what described it. But I didn't tell you about the good part. See, there was also a good part that happened in that childhood. By pulling the shade down on those feelings, those feelings hurt too much. They were too painful. So by just pulling the shade down, I became a survivor. And I became an achiever. I found out that nobody was going to take care of me and that I better take care of myself. And so I became an achiever. And I met another guy, and I married him. He married me with those 4 kids. We moved down to Indio. And I drank almost always to black out. I thought that's what you did. It never took very much, but most of the time I blacked out. One night we got in a fight, and I went for a walk. I was 23 years old, and I went for a walk, and I blacked out, and the police picked me up, and they threw me in jail. And I got bailed out of jail, and the next morning I had to go to court, and I was so embarrassed, and I was so ashamed, and I was absolutely mortified. And the judge fined me $25 for drunk walking. And can I have my water? And I decided I was not going to be an alcoholic like my father, so I was never, ever going to drink again. And for the next 13 years, I didn't drink. But I went home, and I wasn't going to be a drinker. And I was watching my husband's drinking, and I sure didn't want to be married to an alcoholic, so I became totally obsessed with his bottle. I became the little angel. I paid all the bills. I ran the whole show. And I was the good guy, and he was the drunk. And who couldn't feel sorry for poor Billy? I even had another kid because I thought maybe if he had his own kid, then he would stop his drinking. I tried everything, threw the booze down the sink, everything. In the meantime, my kids are growing up. And my kids are growing up crooked. They're growing up crooked just exactly like I did. I didn't know how to be a mother any more than my mother knew how to be a mother. Or my kids do, you see. And my kids are growing up. It's real hard for me to tell you about feelings. The best way I can do it is I've got this great description. An alcoholic is one with a great thirst for wholeness. That was me. I was always searching and seeking and looking for something that was going to fill up the empty, lonely, needy, so unworthy. Those unworthy, lonely places. I was always looking for that. And so what happened to me is I decided I need to find a God. And I got baptized in 3 of the major religions. And I found a God, a punishing God. And I have a much different God now. But the one that I found at that time, I had to measure up to. And I had to be good enough for. And that wasn't working out, so I decided about that time, now my kids are all out and they're doing their drugs and their booze, and I haven't had a drink for 13 years, and I walked down the stairs and got underneath the seat of my husband's car, and I got out his bottle of vodka, and I drank the whole thing, and then I took a bottle of Darvon. And the paramedics came and they took me down and put me in Parkside West, that's the psych ward, and I stayed there for 3 months. And everybody thought I was having a nervous breakdown because I wasn't drinking in those days. And I got out of that hospital and I left my husband because I completely blamed him for everything. It was his fault. Everything was his fault. And I moved out into this apartment and I decided now what I need is a man to make Billy happy. And I didn't do that a little bit either. I got love and sex totally all mixed up, completely mixed up. And I didn't know how to trust, and I didn't know how to have a best friend, intimate relationship. And most of my life, what I've done is I don't trust. I never trust. See, I have 100 friends, but if anybody starts to get close to me, I get real scared and I push them away some way. And I'm just starting to have a relationship with Larry, my friend who came with me. And we're having this relationship. We're doing a lot of things different. See, we don't take each other hostage anymore. and we allow each other to be different. And that's big time for me to allow him to be different and allow him to be him. But I find out that when I give up the idea of when Larry ought to go to work and when Larry ought to spend his money and when Larry ought to watch videos, our life works really good. And it's like being different it's like these two pillars up here. They're holding up one roof, and you put the two pillars together, and what happens to the roof? The roof rocks back and forth like this. But if you keep the pillars out here, then you have a strong foundation. And the best thing is, you see, I never, ever had a commitment. All my relationships, I was always screwing around and messing around on them. And this time I find out that if I want to have a close, intimate, best friend relationship, then I need to be committed and I need to be true. And who I need to be true is, I need to be true to Billie, because I want to have that intimate, close friend relationship. And we have this 30-day clause. And the 30-day clause says that we're both alcoholics. And when we get into a fight, what do we want to do? We want to cut and run. So what we do is we just stay in the stuff for 30 days, and at least if we're going to be splitting, then at least we split and we're clear. And we've been through a few of those 30 days. It's almost coming on 4 years that our relationship is working. And it's working pretty good anyway. Yeah. You know, what happened to me next was the worst day of my entire life. I know that I can go through anything the rest of my entire life from what happened to me. There was a policeman at my door early in the morning, told me that my Bobby had been murdered. My Bobby was 20, and they told me that he had been stabbed in the heart and lungs, and I didn't believe it. This is a disease of denial, and I didn't believe it. And I raged at God, and I didn't believe it. And on the third day, I went up and I looked in the casket, and it was my Bobby. And I blamed God, and I raged at God. Just terrible. If anybody would mention anything about God, I would totally turn my back and have nothing, absolutely nothing to do about a God. I went up there and I made the arrangements that a mother makes to bury her son. And I found one thing, because I couldn't pull the shade down on those terrible feelings of guilt and rage and anger. And I just pulled the shade. I couldn't do it, but I found one thing that stopped it, and that was alcohol. And I started drinking every single solitary day. And I was just really, really, totally crazy. About that time, I got picked up on a 502, and I got thrown in the Van Nuys jail. And I called my boyfriend, and he wouldn't come and get me. And there was a woman in this corner, and she was tall, and she was skinny, and she was beautiful, and she was laughing at me. And she said, you know, you give it away for free, and your boyfriend won't even come and get you. And I charge plenty, and my pimp's coming to get me. And her pimp came and got her, and I stayed in the jail all night. And I rode one of those green wire buses to the courtroom the next day. And I rationalized it this time, and I minimized it. Anybody with all my problems, wouldn't they do that too? And I got rid of that boyfriend, and and I married the next guy. And the next guy I married, he told me he was an alcoholic, and that he hadn't had a drink for 8 years. He didn't come to AA, he took Antabuse. And I was Daddy's little darling when he was drunk, and I was his billy goat when he was sober. And so I wanted to be his little darling. I wanted a drinking partner, and I was hoping that he would be drinking with me. And one day I came home from a sales meeting, and he met me at the door with a Manhattan. I mean, I was in my glory for about 2 weeks. Now this guy, he was a pediatrician. He was a real gentle, soft-spoken guy. And I mean, you would think, if there are any newcomers in here, you would think that if he hadn't been drinking for the last 8 years, he might have been building up some good drinking time. That is not how our disease works. You see, it gets worse, never better, worse and worse and worse. And he hadn't been drinking for those 8 years, and his alcoholism was getting worse and worse. He was a raving, raging maniac. I mean, totally. And we had to take him down to a care unit. And the first Saturday night, I got a whole group of guys, and we took him down to this meeting, this big speaker meeting, and I took him back to the hospital. I went home. I looked up in the liquor cabinet, and I said, now, you know, he's an alcoholic. We're going to have to throw all this booze away, so I better drink it. And I tried. And my little daughter came home at 2 o'clock in the morning, Jana, and I was trying to commit suicide like I'm always doing when I'm drunk, and she took me down to the care unit and put me in the care unit. And the care unit, they said they could get us sober, but in order to stay sober, we had to come to AA and we had to work some steps and get a sponsor. So I went back to that meeting and I met a guy that I knew, and he gave me a little piece of paper with the name Daisy on it, and he told me to ask her to be my sponsor, and I did. She said, yeah, she'd be my sponsor if I would agree to go to a step study and if I would call her before I drank. And that's what I did. And this little lady, she loved me. She offered me help. She offered me hope. There were no rules with her. And she was a stepper. And she believed in working the steps, and right away she said that I drank because of fear, anger, and guilt. If I wanted to get the promises of this program, the freedom and the growth and the happiness that is promised in this program, what I needed to do was to work those steps. So right away she had me working on step 1. She had me writing, why did I think I'm an alcoholic? And why was my life unmanageable? She told me that the first step was the surrender step, the desperate step, the defeated step, the step that says I am sick and tired of fighting. I'm sick and tired of failing. I'm sick and tired of over and over and over trying to stop drinking. It's totally, and I'm sick and tired of my life. I don't want to live that life. And somehow she got it in my head. You see, I had tried to quit drinking so many times. What used to happen to me is I would wake up in the morning with the worst hangover you could ever imagine. My eyes would be totally swollen shut. Couldn't remember where I'd been the night before or who with or what. And I'd look in the mirror hating myself, no self-esteem, no dignity, promising myself I will never, ever drink again until 4 o'clock that very same day, and the gnawing had come right down in the pit of my stomach. And I'd be drunk all over again. And that would happen over and over and over again. She told me that I didn't have any more excuses. You see, it was always something, if only I had the right husband, if only I had the right job. It was those kids' fault. Or if I had more money, then I could control my life, and maybe I could even drink once in a while. She said I had no more excuses and no more rewards. That if I've got a Harvard attorney up here, tells me one more time, I'll quit tomorrow. Oh, well, I already drank today. But she told me that if I continued to drink, if I had one little excuse lurking in the back of my head, that I would drink again. And for me to drink again meant nothing but death or insanity or a wet brain. That's what for me to drink again means down that road, that I didn't have any more, and that my life was unmanageable. I thought it was only the booze. Today I know how unmanageable my life is. And what I try to do with my life is I try to get a little balance in my life. I try to get a little balance in my AA, and I try to get a little balance in my work and in my home. I'm really compulsive and really obsessive, and I tend to continually stay so busy. And I have a new sponsor because my little sponsor, Daisy, died. And when she died, I went down to the hospital. And she said to me, Billie, I can't do any more 12-step calls. And I said, oh, yes, you can. Because whenever I go out to share, I'm going to share the recovery that you gave me. And that's always what I hope to do. And so then she said, I forgot where I was. Larry, where was I? Oh, well. It's all right. I know where I'm at. So now I got this new sponsor, see? And I'm talking about being manageable. No wonder I got messed up, because you know what? My life is sometimes I can get so obsessed that I got to obsess on work or obsess on this or get AA or do this. And my new sponsor tells me it's real simple. It's not easy, but it's real simple. She says, all you have to do, Billie, is give up the struggle. Give up the struggle. Be still and know that I am there. Be still and know that my Papa is there. And now I want to tell you about my papa. You see, these steps are the things that allow us to live so we don't have to drink. And in these steps, it says that we get to have a God of our very own understanding, and that's underlined in 2 places on the steps. And so, since we get to have a God of our very own understanding, I get to have my papa. My father died dead drunk, and I always wanted to have this loving, caring, supportive, wonderful father that was going to be there for me and that was going to be in my corner for me. And so I got my papa. And she says, I just have to give up the struggle and be still and listen to my papa instead of running around being so busy that I don't have time to be still and to listen. And it's just a good thing that steps 2 says, came to believe in a power greater than I am. It didn't say come to believe in a God. For so long I had to just put God on the shelf because I couldn't deal with any kind of a God. But a power greater than I am, something that made the sun and the moon and the stars all work in perfect syncrasy, I knew that there had to be something like that. And so I could just put the thing on the shelf, and I started going to this step study. And it was at a recovery house. And the women in that recovery house, they had lost their health, their hope, their kids, their joys. I mean, they were down to the bottom pits. They had lost everything. And I started going to that meeting and started watching the women. And I was about 9 months sober. And it was Bobby, my son's birthday. And I woke up in the morning and I was totally, completely crazy. Just crazy. And I remember it was a Tuesday, and I remember knowing that if I could just get to that step study, I would be okay. And I waited all day. I also remember concentrating my foot on the gas pedal to get by the liquor stores. Because if I knew that if I could just get a drink in there, it would get rid of all that pain that was down in there. And I got into the meeting and I sat on the chair, and the women in that meeting, they listened to me. And they loved me. And they said, Billie, if you just don't drink, one day at a time, it'll get better. You see, most people couldn't listen about that murder because I was in such awful pain, and because it was our society, we don't have a place to put out and be able to talk about those kinds of feelings. But those women, they listened. And they said, if you just don't drink, it'll get better. And I haven't drunk, and it has gotten better. It's gotten so much better that I can't even believe. My sponsor told me a whole lot of stuff about death. She told me that it's a physical law that our universe, that energy never dies, and that he is just a way. He wrote a poem that said, I am who I am. And you see, I believe he is. And I've just had to let his spirit go. And how death speaks to me today is to live in the now. Yesterday is completely gone. And you know, I did a lot of things in my past that I'm ashamed of. And when I get back in my past, I get into terrible depressions. These depressions that so many of us alcoholics seem to be able to get into. And the same thing when I get over here into the future. When I get into this future part, then I can get crazy with what might happen, what's going to happen, da-da-da-da-da-da-da. And then I can also go into depression. But how death speaks to me today is to stay in the now. And I continued to go to that meeting and watch those people, those women. And there was a young woman by the name of Patsy, and Patsy could not stay sober. And she went through that house 2 times. That house is a 90-day program. And every time you'd go into the meeting, I know many of you have seen this. Every time you'd go into the meeting, her hand would be up. And her hand would be up with that hopeless, lost look on her face. And one night I went into the meeting, and the lights were on her face. And I said to her, Patsy, what's happened to you? And she said, I don't know, but I haven't smiled in so long that my face hurts. And you know what? That's the miracle of Alcoholics Anonymous. That's the miracle that we're talking about up here. And you know, it's what miracles are to me are transformed lives. And isn't it something? 50 years of miracles, 50 years of transformed lives. And we get the proof with a whole room full of people right here, sitting here in front of us with transformed lives. We're a bunch of helpless, hopeless drunks. And we're sitting here in this room tonight, creating and celebrating our lives with this wonderful convention. It's great to be part of that. Absolutely, absolutely wonderful. And I continued to watch those women. And something was transforming their life. Something was transforming my life. Something was relieving them of their alcoholism. Something was relieving me of my alcoholism. And I got this friend that says, if you want to see the face of God, just look around. And that's how I found my God, was by looking in the faces of those women and in their fears and their tears and sharing all their lives with them, sharing their transformation and sharing their miracles with them is where I found my God. And now my lady is telling me that I need to work my fourth step. That was incredible to me. I was real good at the gossip and working your fourth step. But mine, I didn't want to do it. I'm a perfectionist, and I didn't want to do it. But she was really a very smart lady. She had me get this little stenographer's tablet and just simply write. And she told me to write the good stuff and the bad stuff. And turn the page and not look back. And I would write a little bit every night, and I'd turn the page, and I did that for 5 or 6 months. And finally I got the courage to take it down to her and give it to her. And I was real scared and real shamed and real embarrassed because I loved her, because she was the one that taught me how to love and trust women. And I loved her. But she assured me it was going to be okay. And she told me that I needed to read it to her, and I read it over to her. And she shared some of the things that happened to her with hers. And then she said, when we finished, she said, now, Billie, do you believe that your God can forgive you for all this stuff? And I said, yeah, I believe that. She said, then you have to forgive yourself right now. So we alcoholics, we want to pick at our sores and go over and over and over and over it. She said, well, you don't ever have to write about it again. You never have to talk about it again. That part of it is totally gone. And about that time, I heard Clancy, and he was talking about the women on Main Street who never get sober because of the guilt. And can you imagine being free from all of that junk, all of that stuff in your past? And today I realize, you see, I could not have written an inventory about guilt. I didn't know guilt. About anger, I didn't know anger. Resentments, I didn't have any of those feelings. I didn't know any of those feelings. They were not mine. I could not. Now I can write a 4-step today that's different. But that's how I wrote it at that time. And I'm always expressing either one or the other things, either love or fear. Either one of those things are the things that I'm always expressing. And I find out that behind my character defects, behind every single one of my character defects, first of all comes fear. And then comes every one of the dishonesty, inferiority, superiority, ego, rage, violence, all of my character defects. First of all comes fear, and then behind all those character defects, behind fear comes all of those character defects. And on the other side, I have love. And you see, I can only express either one or the other at one time. And behind love comes all the wonderful, beautiful spiritual principles that we have here in Alcoholics Anonymous. All of the courage. It takes courage to live every day and not take that first drink. The honesty, the telling the truth, the being free, the service that we do, the love and laughter that we have in these rooms. All of those things, those wonderful spiritual principles, living in the now, that we get behind love. And what do I do when I get in these compulsive, obsessive kinds of things where I'm just going on and on and on and on and on and on? What I try to do, and what I certainly tell the women that I sponsor, to get out of that fear and out of all those character defects and get into the other side, is to go out and do another loving thing for another person for fun and for free, as Chuck C. used to say. Just for fun and for free, and to get out of all of that stuff. The 8th step says making a list of all the people that we harmed. And it's the first time that I started taking responsibility for my life. I didn't want to be responsible for my life. It was if only Jim or Joe or John or whatever his name is would come back and make Billie happy. It was if only I had the right job or the right car or the right house, if I was only skinnier, then I could be happy. And I find out that happiness is an inside job. And I find out that being a member of Alcoholics Anonymous means to me to be responsible for myself, to go to work, to pay taxes, to be a responsible member of society is what the 8th step is to me. Making that list was the start of it. 3 of the amends that I made. The first amend that I'm going to talk about is that husband that I blamed, Laverne. I blamed him for everything. And he was still drinking, and I went to him and I tried to tell him I was sorry for my stuff. And he couldn't hear me. He absolutely, because this disease of alcoholism is such a disease of denial, the wall was up and he could not hear me. But a year or so after, he got the esophageal varices and the cirrhosis of the liver, and he had to have a bypass of the liver, one of those big surgeries. And one night I was sharing from the podium, and I looked up and he was standing in the back of the room. And I got to make a public amend, and I'm very happy for that. Because while Laverne never drank again for the next 4 years, his alcoholism, his cirrhosis of the liver got worse and worse and worse. And by the time he died, he did not even have enough left upstairs to tie his shoe or to feed himself or to dress himself. Alcohol had completely robbed him of everything. My next amend was to my husband, Bob, my 3rd husband. I've been married 3 times. All my husbands are dead. And probably that's why Larry and we don't get married. Need that laugh. And then my next amend was to my husband, Bob, and he's my last husband. And, we had this relationship like passing in the night. We didn't know how to be close or anything, and we were separated. And my new sponsor had me writing an inventory about all the men in my life, starting with my father. And she had me writing this inventory about what my part was. I never wanted to look at what my part was, but I wrote this long inventory and threw it under the bed. And Bob went on the table for an angioplasty, and only 1% die, and he didn't make it. And I went with his kids down to the funeral home to make arrangements for his funeral. And that night I went home, and I took out that inventory that I had written, and I wrote a long amends letter about what my part of our relationship, how you see we both wanted to have a loving, caring, intimate, supportive relationship with each other, and neither one of us, we just did not know how to do it. We didn't know. How sorry I was that I worked all the time, that I didn't be the partner that I wanted him to be, that I didn't put anything into it at all, nothing. How sorry I was. And I wrote that, and the next morning I got up real early, and I went down to the funeral home, and I pulled a chair up to the casket, and I read that amends letter to him. And then I folded it up, and I put it there in his jacket over his heart. And you see, Alcoholics Anonymous and these wonderful, beautiful steps that we have freed me once again. And the hardest amend that I get to talk about, or that I have to talk about, I talk about because so many people are healed with it. It's the amend of my Cindy, who was 17 and was hit by a car when she was 17. Her diagnosis was bilateral cerebral contusion, brainstem damage, fractured femur, cerebit. We brought her home from Portland, Oregon. It happened in Portland by United Airlines by Aerostretcher, and she was in a coma for 2 months. We were just ready to move her to a convalescent home, and miraculously, suddenly, one day, she woke up. And everything had to be reprogrammed. How she was to walk, how she was to talk, everything. She had no memory, absolutely no memories of the past. And now it's about 10 years later, and Cindy is been through her drugs and her alcohol. She's married. She has 2 children. A lot of drugs and alcohol. She is 4 years clean and sober, and I'm very proud of her. I'm very, very proud of Cindy. She sponsors all these young women. She takes her program very, very seriously. And she was writing her 4th step. And the deal I have with Larry is, in the beginning, one of the deals we have is we tell the truth about our feelings. It's real hard for me to tell the truth. It's been one of my big lessons. I don't want to tell you the truth. You might not love me. You might not like me. You might not do what I want you to do. It's real, real hard for me to tell the truth. But we have that deal. And Cindy was writing her 4th step, and I knew that she was giving it to her sponsor, and the phone rang one day. And she went, "Mom, I have to talk to you. I don't have a lot of memories. But the only thing that I can come up with is that you never wanted me. You rejected me. You were mean to me. You used to slap me upside the head. You used to leave me with the babysitter and take the other kids. And I don't have any memories, but I have all these awful, awful feelings and all of this stuff. And I need to talk to you about it. And Larry was sitting on the bed, and I looked at him, and I took a big, deep breath. And I know that only my papa could have given me the courage to tell Cindy the truth. Because any other time in my sobriety, I would have said, "Oh, Cindy, you know that's not true. You know that's not true." But this time, what I did is I said, "Yes, Cindy. I rejected you. I didn't love you. I didn't want you. You were my fourth child, and I was 8 months pregnant with you, and my husband went off and left me, and I was 20 years old. I didn't know how to love you. And I didn't want you, and I rejected you, and I was mean to you. And all I can tell you is that I am so, so sorry. And I love you with my whole heart right now." Cindy was crying so hard that she hung up the phone. And I called up my sponsor. And my sponsor said that I validated her pain, that I allowed her to go through the pain so she could come through on the other side, and that she was going to be free, that maybe I lost her, but she was going to be free. Several weeks, I don't know what time, I don't know about time, but a time went by. And one day the phone rang, and she said, "Mom, I need to come and talk to you." I could hardly wait until the day came. And finally the day came. She took me in the bathroom, and she said, "You know, Mom, you made your 9th step on me by telling me the truth. And I got to tell you what a rotten little kid I was, and how sorry I am about that. But the best thing that she said to me that day was, I don't have to try to get your love anymore. I know, Mom, I know that you love me." And you see, I got to receive Cindy's forgiveness. It seems like we do all things for lessons, and one of my big lessons in my life has been for forgiveness. When I was about 2 years sober, I was just absolutely nutty crazy. And my sponsor told me that hate destroys the hater. I hated the murderer of my son, Bobby. I went through a trial that went on for at least 13 months. It was postponed, and I sat in the courtroom and I looked at that murderer that had stabbed my child. And she told me that in order for me to get rid of that terrible pain, like a knife twisting right here in my own heart, that I was going to have to forgive the murderer of my son. How do you forgive the murderer of your son? I wrestled with it, and I went on and on and on and on. And finally, one of you told me that when I was driving around out there in a blackout, I didn't kill somebody, but I could have. And when I decided that maybe the murderer was drug-affected or alcoholic, then I could forgive him. And when I forgave the murderer of my son, that pain went away. Because she said that hate destroys the hater. We alcoholics, we cannot afford to have resentments and rages. And our big book tells us how to get rid of the resentments and that, and how to get to forgiveness is to give up the judgments, to see the other man as spiritually sick. And that's what I had to do. And what I found out that forgiveness is just a decision. It's just a decision to give up the pain. Forgiveness is just a decision. It's just a decision to give up the hurt. And sometimes, you see, I had to give up the pain, and I had to give up the hurt a lot of times because I kept taking them back, but I had to do it over and over and over until finally I was totally and completely free. And today I get to be grateful for the 20 years that I had with my son instead of angry and raging because I've lost my son. And the point I'm trying to get to, which has come to me only in the last few weeks, as we were saying the Our Father one night, and I was looking at the forgiveness that I've had in my life. Because I forgave the murderer of my son, forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. I wonder, absolutely, if I would have been able to receive the forgiveness from Cindy had I not gone through the process of forgiving the murderer of my son. Beautiful process, huh? Anyway, a little bit I want to talk about that I don't have to, you see, when I came here to Alcoholics Anonymous, real slowly, I don't have to buy that lie anymore that I'm no good, because I have an 11th step. And you told me when I came here that I was a unique, beautiful child of God, and that I didn't have to buy that lie for me. It took a very long time. But today I know that I don't have to buy that lie, and that I have my Papa. And my Papa is totally limitless. The only person that limits my Papa is me. I'm the one that does that all the time. And you see, I go to meetings to give, not to get. And when I go to meetings to give, I continually stay interested and stay excited about my meetings. And my children, just a little bit about my children. My son Danny, a bad heroin addict for 15 years, bad, on the streets. He spent a year in the county jail, and he wasn't even out in 6 months. He had 6 felony counts against him. And the call came, Mom, this time you got to help me. This time I'm going to go to San Quentin. And the only thing that happened to me is I went to Al-Anon. And yeah, for Al-Anon. In Al-Anon, they taught me how to stop enabling my children to death. They taught me to say, okay, God, he's your kid and he's my kid. And, I can't take care of him. You got to take care of him. So I had to tell Danny, I cannot give you anything anymore. And Danny wasn't sent to San Quentin. He was sent to a place called Crossroads, and he stayed up there for 9 months. And he got out of Crossroads and he moved back to Covina. And I was living with him, and I'm 6 years sober. No sponsor, no meetings, no steps, and we all know what happens. It wasn't long before he had the needle back in his arm. Not only in his arm, but in his wife's arm, too. And I'm living with him. I'm 6 years sober. I'm walking by in my ya-ya land. Yeah, it's going to get better. Yeah, it's going to get better. And they're nodding out in their heroin. I mean, it was really something. The only thing is, once you've been in this program, once you've seen how this program works and you get that freedom, then you know how it works. And it wasn't long before he and his wife, they went up to Bullhead City to his wife's mother's trailer. And they cold turkey kicked it for 8 days. Got back in the trailer, rode right back to Covina, and right by the house to the connection. That's how cunning and powerful and baffling this disease is. But it wasn't long until they went back up there again. In 8 days, they cold turkey kicked it again. Only this time, Danny found old Joe, sober 35 years out of the swamps of Alabama. And old Joe made him write his 4th step when he was 23 days clean. And today, Danny has a big 4 right up here. He's very involved in Narcotics Anonymous. People came from all over the world last month, and they were rewriting the 12 and 12. And Danny was all in the concepts and all in all that stuff. And he says, Mom, I can't turn my will and my life over to that God, but I can to love. And you know what? God is love. And my daughter, Gloria, she went through that house that meant so much in my early recovery. And she has 5 years. Her deal was cocaine and then alcohol, back and forth and back and forth. She'd say, I want to go to your meeting with you, Mom. And I'd go over and pound on the door on Tuesday nights, and she'd be hiding behind the drapes. She absolutely would not come out. And I've already told you about Cindy. How's my time? A little bit more about my job. My job is medical sales. I do. And 8 years ago, I was doing really bad. See, in medical sales, your bottom line is, what is your increase of sales over last year? Mine was minus $4,000. And it was bad. And I went to my boss, and I was trying to tell him that I was very, very sorry, and I was working so hard. And then I heard this tape, and it said, show up and go with the flow. Well, I didn't used to like to go places where people wouldn't smile at me. They might not buy my product and so on. And I started just showing up. And showing up means turning every knob and trusting my Papa and walking in the doors and making 12-step calls on my customers, giving my customers love and service. How can I help you? What can I do for you? And now for 8 years in a row, I've had the High Achievers Award. I won the Gold Cup in 1987, and As of July, my increase in sales is $209,000, and I'm going to have the Gold Cup again this year. It's going to be given in St. Thomas. Larry and I are going to go to St. Thomas. You know what, though? I didn't do this. Alcoholics Anonymous is responsible for this. There is no way that that drunk lady of old could walk down the aisle and get the Gold Cup. Absolutely. Absolutely and positively no way. I think that love is the most powerful force on the universe. And I think that love is more than just that huggy-kissy stuff. I think that love is action. And I'm grateful for the people in my life. I'm grateful for you, John, coming up telling me you love me before. That was really nice. I'm grateful for that kind of love. I'm grateful for my aunts and cousins that came here tonight. I'm grateful for all of you that are here tonight. But you know, when I came to Alcoholics Anonymous and you said to me, I love you, I would shut down. No way did I know how to receive your love. And you can only have what you can receive. If I can't have it, I can't receive it. And I started way back, and I always close with the same thing because it was one of my great lessons. A lady came up to me and she said, boy, that's a nice new pair of shoes. And I said, these old things? And my sponsor said, you just slapped that lady's gift right in the face. The lady was giving you a gift when she told you your shoes were nice. Why don't you just say thank you? And I started saying thank you. And I started receiving your love. And you see, I go to sales meetings all over. It's inappropriate to talk about feelings in sales meetings. But I can come here and I can share my love and laughter with you here in these rooms. It's the most powerful force of love and laughter at any place in the whole world that I've ever, ever, ever found. This week is my birthday week. I've been 12 and I've been receiving cakes. And on Saturday, Larry was playing a song. And the song talked about, I used to be in the shade with the blues on parade. And that's not quite about how it was. I used to be in the darkness. Because you see, what drugs and alcohol are just total, complete darkness. What my 12 and 12 says, that my step study book tells me, is nothing grows in the darkness. And Alcoholics Anonymous is the sunshine. The total, total sunshine. It's the sunshine that allows me to walk on the sunny side of the street. And I'm real, real grateful for that. Real grateful for all of you. And I love you very much, and thank you.